Hello. Sorry for the delay. I didn't do any checks prior to and forgot my microphone gets changed randomly on my current computer. Hopefully next day or so I'll set up a different computer for streaming and work out all those little kinks. I've also changed the frames per second to see if I can get some of the reduced errors I'm getting with packets being dropped. So, for those of you joining us for the first time, we're covering this contacts application that we are building from ground up. We started off the stream with introducing to some commonly used IDEs in the Microsoft world. Microsoft Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, and JetBrains Writer, which I use for most of the stream. Then kind of walk through some of the model development. We've walked through the creating the business case and management layer. We then started working on last Thursday the building out the data layer. So we built out using a framework, a connections to our SQLite database. All these videos and source code can be found at github.com/jguadagno/contacts. Today we're going to kind of continue along with the database and start looking at the code for it. Essentially, how we're going to tie in the user interface to the code, even though we don't have a user interface built. Let's go take a look at Writer, see where we are. So if we open up the Solution Explorer, we'll see we have a console app, which I later found out after the demo that we did last week that that's not really needed. We have our data, which has our context, which is used in any framework, our migrations, as well as our domain and logic level. If we look right now at our contacts context, let's hide this for a second. It just shows us do we have the contacts, we're saving the addresses, phone numbers, address types, and phone types, and we're using SQLite. For those of you that are joining us that are slightly advanced or have done any framework in the past, you've probably noticed or saying to yourself, Joe, we don't do what's on lines 15 and 16. It's like, I agree with you, we don't. This is just a sample. I'm showing how we can build an app and then start to re-architect it in ways to make things a little bit easier. Let's take a look at the database for a second and see what kind of records we have in there. If I remember correctly, we didn't put anything in there. So I'm going to go to Contacts, open it up. And after it connects to the database, it usually takes a second the first time. We've got a little green here, which means it connected, and nothing, which is good because we didn't really put anything in it last time. So there's a couple of different things you can do for putting stuff in database. You can open up in a tool like I just did and manually add records. Any framework supports something called seeding, which allows you to pre-populate the data ahead of time. I typically never really do that unless it's a sample app. I usually have separate SQL scripts to add in the data for my application, or you can kind of do it in a development environment while you're playing around with it. But still, especially in development, I like to have those things scripted out in a SQL file so that I can destroy the database at any time and recreate them. We're not going to do a lot of that right now. We might do some of it via the console, or maybe we'll go and script it out. I'm not sure yet. We'll play it by ear. So let's see, where are we? We have the contact data. Now we need to access this data. So we built out this logic layer, a business layer, a manager layer, or a service layer, depending on your organization and your needs. We stuck with the manager layer, and if I remember correctly, when we built this out, everything was to be implemented later. So let's implement the first one. A couple different ways to do this. We are going to start now with the non-preferred by me approach of doing this. And that's with us creating an instance of the any framework context in a future episode, maybe next one, maybe Tuesday, maybe Thursday. We are going to look at using dependency injection to give our contact manager slash service slash business layer the database that we want to use and not have it quote unquote hard coded. So we start this off with a private variable that we will call contact context. It's really hard to say. In a lot of examples, you'll hear something like Contacts.DB, but I need to give it a type first. So let's do what I call it. I believe it was contact. Yeah, contact context. It's not going to find it because I don't have the reference, but as we seen multiple times, ReSharper / JetBrains Writer is smart enough to give us that. Let's call it underscore contact context. Yeah, we could ignore that for a second. Do Option Enter, and it doesn't see it anywhere. Why don't you see it? Probably waiting to build, so I'll just manually edit. Add reference. Oh, what did I do? Oh, that's because I changed these. I changed the contacts data in the last time we chatted to try and get the migrations working, which was not necessary. So I'm going to go back and refix that. I made a mental note to fix it, but I want to do it on the stream in case people were watching it side by side. So we're going to go back and do .NET Standard, take it away from a core application. That's probably why ReSharper / Writer is not seeing it. Now if I do Control Option Enter, there it goes. Now it can reference it because it's a compatible library. Essentially, I was saying, take this .NET Core application and reference the standard in it, or reference a .NET Core application inside of a standard application. Now, in order to access it, let's do this. We are going to do a using statement. You always want to do a using statement because that closes any database connections that you don't need. And since we're only going to be using this method when we need to, actually, no, let's not do that right now because we are not going to be using dependency injection yet. So we need to create an instance of this when the class is created. So let's do it, at least not do it totally terrible. So I'm gonna take that out and do a private contact manager. If you're watching the stream and you're in the chat, say hi so you know the people are here. And we're gonna new up an instance of it at so we are gonna do contact equals new contact dot context, and then we are good to go. Now here we want to return a contact. So let's do underscore, let's return it. We're not going to do anything necessary with the variable yet. Underscore context dot contacts. And then what do we want to do? We want to return the contact with the given identifier specified in the contact ID. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. There is the find method. There is the find async method. Those will essentially search with a primary key and come back with the value. So if I do find and then give it a contact ID, it will go and use the primary ID and match them together. There's also other options which we'll see in the get contacts, but this will essentially use a primary key, which if you don't remember, let's take a quick look at that. The contact has a primary key of the contact ID. We can verify that by taking a look at the database in the database viewer here and see this little key here that's telling us that it is the primary key, which means it's unique and we can only see it, or we can only add one copy of it. So now that we have that here, let's go back to, let's close this, close this, close this, close this, close this, get back to here. So now we're going to return an ID when it's found there. The ID is not found. I believe this returns an error. We'll give that a test in a minute. Actually, why don't we go test it now? Let's go to our console app. And here we are going to do a var contact manager equals new contact manager make constructor public. Did I? Oh yeah, I made it private. It should be public. There it goes. So now we're going to have a new contact manager, and then I'm going to do var contact equals contact manager dot get contact and pass it in the ID of 1. And then let's just do a console dot write line. And then we should have the full name property here. And that should write out whatever the first name is, middle initial, and last name. So if we start this out, let's run it and see what happens. Now, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've written using the find method. It's going to return a null, which will cause an exception on line 12 because I'm accessing a null object. It's building everything right now. And I probably should have built before I started it to make sure that everything was good. I didn't change anything since the last build, so everything should be good. Sometimes when I check in the stuff to Git, I might forget a file and everything could be quote unquote dirty. Build succeeded. Lovely. Now let's see, it should be running it. And I got the exception. Object reference not set to an instance of a variable on line 12, which is this case. That's because the contact came back as null. So I can do some defensive programming and do something like if contact equals null, console dot write line. Yes, I know. It detected an error in the program because it exited with a non-zero. So my Mac is saying, hey, something's wrong. You want to yell at this application? Write line. And we're going to say, hey, stop with the extra tabbing. Why are there extra tabs? I don't like extra tabs. Let's see. Contact was not found. And then else. Let's move you up to here. And I'm getting this weird syntax. I'm going to show you what it looks like, but for this particular case, I don't want to do it because it makes it a little bit messier. But this is essentially converting it to something called a coalesce operator. So I'm changing it to say if the contact equals null, print this out. Otherwise, print this out. To me, in this particular case, being the example it is, it's not as forgiving or it's not as clean for newer people. So let's go and run this again. See what happens. Should only be compiling this one, this DLL, so it should be a little bit faster. And by a little bit, I meant not faster. As soon as you threaten Visual Studio with it not being faster, it gets faster. Fortunately, this is just .NET build underneath. And you see here, I got contact not found. So let's go and add a record just to make sure that everything is working. So I am going to, where'd you go? Shortcut key is the command key and down. Also notice in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, I added a screen capture, or not screen capture, but a keystroke capture. So if I ever do any of the special hotkeys, you can see them in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. So here we're going to do a new record, which is Control-Shift-N. Nope, Control-Window-N. I was practicing this weekend too. I don't want a new file. Got to be on the actual tab for it to happen. Notice here, this is a little feature of the writer. Actually, Data Grip, the plugin that's being used. Shows you that this code here is going to be generated because it knows that's a unique key. And then I can add in contact information. So I'm going to do Joseph. Yeah, it'd be nice if I spelled my own name correctly. Joseph James Guadagno, email address, and yes, I know this is public, but my email address is all over the place. Birthday, let's do it for 05, or actually this has to be in a certain format for MySQL or SQLite, or it goes a little bonkers. Apparently I was born in the future, so this will ruin the code checks that we have later on. So just to be safe, I'll just set 1900. My wedding anniversary is... Everyone's probably like, oh no, does he know his wedding anniversary? And I do. And I believe I was born at 10 o'clock, or married at 10 o'clock a.m. Although it was really rough night. My brother and I were up playing PlayStation the night before. He was just hanging out because he was my best man, and we were going to go to the church together. I forget what game we were playing, but we went and looked at the clock, and it was 4 in the morning. We're like, oh shit, we got to be at the church in... like 3 hours. So we took like an hour nap, so to speak, and then got ready and drove to the church. Image URL, I think that's enough for now. So I'm going to submit the entry, and now we have a database record there with the contact ID of 1. Now if I rerun the application, we should see my full name come up here. Now the application didn't necessarily need to stop or anything. I stopped it because we're running a console app, so you kind of have to rerun it, and I can actually go to the command line and run it itself. And there it goes, Joseph James was diagnosed. So now we called our contact method and got a list of contacts. So let's go, or actually we got the first contact. So let's go and try to get all the contacts. Kids, don't try this at home. We're working with a smaller database. Right now it's just our sample, so we can return everything. In future conversations or streams, we will look at doing some paging and so I'm looking for sorting and all that other stuff. Right now we're just going to return everything. So I can do here contacts, or return all the contacts. Essentially this will go through and create a select query to give me every contact. It's highlighted in red or squiggly line because if I hover over it, it'll tell me it can't convert a DB set contacts to that, to a list of contacts. So luckily there is a extension method called toList that will go over any source that implements IEnumerable, which is a collection interface that says I can do these certain things, and essentially takes that and converts it into a list that we are using. So now we have that done, console.writeLine, and then we are just going to put a new character. Actually, I don't really have to do that, but let's just do it for space. Put a couple of dashes in there just to see a difference. And then console.writeLine. And actually, we're going to do a for each here. So let's do for each. Hit tab, it's going to give us our template for that. What collection do I want? So I want underscore, or I'm going to do Contact.Manager dot get contacts, and then hit tab. We can give it any name you want. Since this is living locally inside of this for each, var is typically an accepted best practice, although you see contact is an option. So I'm going to hit tab to give it a new name and call this contact. You notice that it said contact 1 because it already recognized that contact was in there, and now there would be a conflict. So I'm going to still call this one contact, but let's go and just call it contact 1 for now. And let's rename this one to something else. I'm going to call this searched contact. And then this one will stay as contact. So we're going to right line the contact dot full name. So if I have this implemented correctly, we should see my name once with 3 dashes, and then my name again until we add another record, which we'll work on in futures. Hello, how are you doing? Try not to look up too much because I've watched some videos and you see me looking up, and that's where the chat is. I gotta find a way to put a chat like in the window right next to me so I don't have to keep looking up. Yeah, has been hot. I haven't been going outside lately. Although I did go out Sunday with my to go say hi to the mother-in-law for Mother's Day. She was sitting inside of, or we sat outside of her front patio, and we all social distance and had Los Fay's breakfast burritos, but we lasted about an hour and it was just too hot. We went inside. So you see, we got the first name, we got the full name here, and then full name here. Let's make this a little bit clearer so we know what we're doing in the future. And then here, system. I don't know why it's. I'm just gonna do console.writeLine. For some reason, it wants to do system. Write line. And we do 3 dashes, contact number 1. This way it's a little bit clearer. Typically you don't do this. We're just testing out and playing around, so we'll get that next. So now we have the ability to get a contact. We have the ability to get all contacts. What is the next item in our list, you ask? I am happy you asked. So let's take a look at that. If we go to our contact manager, the next item is the search. So we have some of the data validation and then the implementation. So there's a couple of different ways to do it. Let's just continue with the simple way. Contact contacts dot here we have a where clause. Where clause tells us find me all the records where this condition meets. So now we have to give it the condition. This uses something called Lambda Syntax, and with Lambda Syntax you kind of give it a quasi formula. So the first is the object you want to do. So in a lot of cases, it's actually not really a lot of cases, it's kind of split half and half. Some will just do the first letter of it, so C, and others will do the lowercase of it. For sake of being able to read it or readability, I'm just going to fully spell out contact, but normally I would just do a C here. Then we give it this Lambda syntax, which is the equal sign and greater than sign. That says, execute this code. You saw here in the bottom, JetBrains pulled up Lambda saying, oh, you're inside of a Lambda now. So now I have access to this contact. So I want to say contact that last name, because that's what we're searching on, last name. And then we're going to say equal to the last name parameter that was passed. And this is a capital N. And then we have both first name and last name, so we need to add an additional clause. So to do that, we want to end, which is a double ampersand, contact.firstname equals first name, and then we need to list it. To list. So now let's close this. We don't need this anymore. Give us some more real estate. So now we're saying within the context, get the contacts where the contact last name equals whatever the parameter was in last name, and the contact first name equals whatever the parameter was in first name, and then return the list. So now we go back to our sample. Let's put a space here. And then we are going to do, actually, one of the things I want to mention before we get, let's do that and we'll come back and clean this up. Let's create a search for contacts. And we are going to make that Contact.Manager.get contacts. And then we want to pass it in. Let's do Joseph. Come on, Slowpoke, catch up. Go a dag now. It's not case sensitive, but you do have to kill me. It's not seen. Oh, because I forgot a quote there. Gets a little picky when you forget a quote. You know, come on, writer, you should know how to spell my last name already. Okay, so the where clause works the same way as the find does with respect to return value. If nothing is found, it's going to return a null. Otherwise, it's going to return a list of all the items. So let's be consistent here. Console.writeLine. Search for contact. And then here we will go if, call it search for contacts. Sounds like we're looking for alien life. Search for contacts, where are they? Equals null. Console.writeLine. And then no contacts were found. Otherwise, let's go and loop through the items. So I'm just going to borrow this text here. And we are not going to do this. We are going to do this. Search for contacts. And we should be good. It's not complaining about this because that's inside of a brace. but I want to be consistent, and let's call this search result contact. Search result contact. Now, if we run this, we should see one item in here. Then we'll go and change it. Yeah, I know. Ain't that the truth, Jeff? Happens all the time with me too, especially if I get the mixing right or if I'm typing faster than the computer can handle. Let's run this and I should see my name 3 times. It's starting to look like I have a complex or something. Depending on whether or not we have time today, maybe we'll make that search a little bit more dynamic so we can take in command line arguments, and we'll open up a terminal window and start playing around with it. This runs, we get contact number 1, first call to the database a little bit slower. Then after that, it was all hunky-dory. So let's go and change this to without an H, and we should see that I wasn't found in the second one. Notice as I hover over here, there's some analysis, 2 warnings and 4 suggestions. Probably cover those at a later thing. But for the most part, it's telling me that spelling errors here, this if can be can be shrunken down to 1 line, which we agreed before that not. This name doesn't, it's never instantiated, which is okay in the console. I'm not worried about, and that we can get rid of this. So just ignoring all those for now. Search for contact. Hey, why didn't it? Oh, that's true. The where clause does come back with stuff, so it just looped through nothing. Contacts wasn't null, but what happened was the length or count was 0. So it always returns a collection, and this is a method name, right? Or did I get deprecated? I know length is there. Change it to count. Look at that. It always returns back a full object, which is why we didn't get the no context found. So let's fix this and go to the next item. So let's copy this out and get ready for the next one. What do we have in store next for us in the contact manager? I'm glad you asked. Ooh, the save contact one. Save contact's a little tricky. Oh, actually, it's not, because the way we implemented it here. Good, I'm glad. So to do that simple couple lines, we do again the contact connects, and then we want to work in our contacts, and then we're going to tell it, brace yourself, we're going to tell it to add this contact. Now that doesn't automatically add it to the database. Any framework will kind of queue up everything. So we have to tell it when we're ready to go and finally commit it. We do that by calling contacts.save changes. And save is only 1 E, Joe. Now I'm looking back up to the top to see we're returning an int. So the reason why we're returning an int is because the method will return save changes. If I hover over it, will tell you that it returns the count of the number of records that was changed. We should probably go back and change that to a Boolean, only because if we start adding in some of the other records, like phone and all those others, we're going to get a count that's not necessarily 1, but not necessarily 0. So essentially, we just want to know if the count doesn't equal 0. So let's return this. We're going to get an error because the return type is wrong. And then we should be good to go. Yep, we are good to go. This doesn't handle any of the data validation. All that's done before. We're going to go and add this sample in the program. This is starting to get a little bit crazy here, so I am going to add a private method to kind of give us the contact. So I think it was domain.contact get valid contact. Only doing this just for test purposes. So I'm going to do return new contact, and then I'm going to use something called object initialization, which will allow me to create and assign all the properties of it. Excuse me. Now you know Writer has the syntax for you. You don't want to specify the contact, so we're going to leave that blank. We're going to do first name equals, let's do my wife, or let's put my wife in here, not necessarily do her. Middle name and last name. Guadagno. Spell your name right, Joe. And then email address, we're going to leave that one null. And then birth date is required, so I will add a birthday 05-03, and she was born at something like 7 in the morning. But we'll just do 0 for now. There goes that IntelliSense you just talked about. Quote. Get rid of this one, and that should be all we need with it. Oh, this is complaining because it wants a real date time, so let's do, I forgot we're doing that. Date time, and then syntax for date time is, helps if I do new date time. Let's see what my overloads are. I think it's year first. Yep. Then month, then day, and then time. And it should be good to go. By the way, this year, month, day, that's actually not type code. That's Writer putting in the parameter that that is going towards. So now I should have a valid contact to add. So let's go and add that. bar was saved. You'll notice as you're watching me type or listen that Boolean values for me, shoot, you or me starting to delay. Ooh, it's obviously me starting to delay. I hit a 90% packet drop. 99%. What's going on? There was a backup that started on my machine just before, but I paused it. Anything else running? Nothing else is running, so give it a minute to catch up, and then I'll try again. Like I was saying, was saved. I usually have booleans in the past tense or something that can return at least the variable name true or false, like was saved, was it saved, yes or no, just to be consistent. Contact.Manager dot save contact. So we are going to save, let's just call this get valid contact. And again, kids, don't try this at home. It's complaining because get valid contact is not static. So let me just make it static because submain is static. So here we are going to write whether or not that record was saved or not. So let's do a system.console.writeLine. And then I'm gonna do was saved, record was added, or come on, record was not added. So this should tell us if we were saved or not. And tell how old I was because I used the word record as opposed to like contact or something. Because in older database technologies, they were called records. So if I run this now, assuming I don't have any other compile time errors, I'm going to close some of the other apps I have running behind the scenes and hopefully speed it up. Still showing some packet loss. Maybe tomorrow, home all day, I'll set up the other machine so that we can stream and go across. Jeff, how you like my big head? I was on a stream on Thursday and one of my, I was wondering if you'll ring a bell. So you... yeah, right, something like that. I got to get in the habit of just looking up and down. I do want to turn on alerts in the next day or two to see. I canceled a couple other things. Let's see. Let's see if I can. Let me close out Chrome too. Chrome can be a memory hog. I'm not using a browser right now. Now it just really dropped everything. Good thing it's recorded and you could come back for it if this doesn't get any better. So now with running no errors, we should see my name eventually multiple times, and then a record for contact was added. Oh no, contact wasn't added. Because email address is required. So it looks like our validation worked, even though that was not the intent of this demo here. Let me go and fix that. I totally forgot I made that field required. Yep, I did right there. So it triggered. Let me go and update this to give her an email address. Do not email at hotmail.com. What are the odds of that actually being an email address? Now, if I run it, I should have it there. And come on, come on, come on. It's a simple little app. It should build quickly. There we go. Contact, connecting to the database. Eventually we're going to pop up and look at the name and see my name there multiple times. Search for contact. Contact was added. I need to change that. So now we see the contact was added. Let's go and validate that the contact was added. And adding contact. And just to make sure we don't add in 17,000 records every time we do that, I'm just going to comment out that section. And let's go take a look. And there we have 2 records. So when I rerun this query and do the get all contacts, I should see myself and my wife's birthday. Okay, what do we have left on the list? I think the only thing left is the delete contact. So good thing about that is we have all the code in one place, even though we can either accept a contact or remove a contact. So let's go and see how we can delete one. It's actually pretty darn easy. Let's copy and paste this code here. And put it here. Actually, let's not even put it there. We don't want it here. We want it in the other one. So we're gonna make this one call this one. Change it up from what we originally designed it for. So first we are going to do this. And now here we have a contact. We want to return delete contact where we need a contact. So let's call get contact and pass it in the contact ID. So if you just give me a contact, I am going to go and delete it. Or sorry, if you just give me a contact ID, I'm going to go out, get the contact from the database, then call delete. And this delete contact, we're going to check to see if one's null. If one's null, we'll get an argument null exception, which I really don't want anymore. So we are just going to return a false. So let's take this out and return false, meaning we didn't delete it because nothing was there. If something was there, we are then going to remove it. So just like we did contacts.contacts.add add. We're going to do contacts.remove and then return the result. So in the project, let's go and delete. So let's see, let's do let's keep the same syntax with all this. And let's do deleting contact. This will only work once because we don't want to keep deleting the same one. In future demos, we will look at something called mock and unit testing, where you can actually validate that things are working without actually going off to the database. So here we are going to delete a contact. And let's say goodbye to contact number 2. And then take this text and do contacts was deleted. Contacts was deleted. Contacts was not deleted. So just to see if it was deleted, since we're close to the hour mark, I'm going to actually, we'll just check the database afterwards to make sure it's there, or make sure it's not there anymore. So let's hit run. I don't know why this thing stopped. Oh, we got a runtime error. Connect to the database faster, faster, will you? And the contact was deleted. So let's go here, take a look. And she is gone. Goodbye. And I believe that is all in our contact manager. Yep, we got add. We did the get. We did get all. We did get with a search. We did a save contact, and we did a delete contact. So if we take a look at our agenda for next time, oh, I closed Chrome. Let me restart Chrome and hope that 17,000 instances don't open, because I did have 3 different Chrome windows open up. A lot of people go crazy with their Chrome tabs. I don't. I usually have multiple windows of Chrome opened up. I will put in the outline, which is loading up on the screen right now, a list of all the links I kind of use to help build this out, or at least the data portion of it at the bottom. I'll add it right here, but looked at adding the data layer. We will probably next time work on introducing mock frameworks or Microsoft fakes as a way to test out our applications without having to use that, without having used the console app. So that's all I had.